Well, I'm back and able to move around a little bit. Recovered from back surgery, and I'm able to move and get out and about, which is a good thing. Today's presentation is going to be with the 38 Special. And for the purpose of today's discussion, which I'm hoping to do before I run out of daylight, we're going to limit ourselves to factory loaded options. Many times people talk about why brand X or brand Y or type whatever pistol is the only one they'll have. Today's presentation is going to be on revolvers. Do revolvers still have a place? In my opinion, yes. They meet a lot of my needs. The 38 Special meets a lot of my needs. I don't know anybody any more justification in my choice of firearm than that. So we're going to look at something like this Model 642 with a 2-inch barrel. The Model 36, which is an all-steel version, and a classic Smith revolver. Both of these guns have 5-shot cylinders. They're built on the J frame. They have 1 7/8 inch barrels, which we loosely call 2-inch. The classic snubby. We have a stainless steel Model 64, which is a stainless version of the Model 10. This one has a heavy barrel, has a cylinder that holds 6 shots. These are built on the slightly larger K-frame. And an extremely smooth trigger. This is the Model 15. Prior to Smith & Wesson going to the number designations, this was called the Combat Masterpiece. This gun was made in the early 80s. I've polished the trigger, smoothed out the action, painted the front side orange where it was easier for me to see, and put a set of grips on it that fit my hand better. This one again, K-frame, 6-shot cylinder. Now, with the difference in barrel lengths, what we end up with in typical 38 Special factory ammunition, you may get somewhere between 1,000 and 1,100 feet a second with some of your hotter loads out of the 4-inch guns. And that same load may only produce about 800 feet a second out of the snubby. So when we look at these two guns, or two types of revolvers, now we're at a point where we have to decide what's best is going to meet our needs. Some cartridges or some loadings of this cartridge can work reasonably well in both. A very specialized load is the Snake Shot capsules. And I use them for dispatching poisonous snakes at close range, say inside of 10 feet. We have a standard pressure 38 Special round nose bullet. Incidentally, with the years, this was the standard issue because it was pretty much standard from the 1890s when the cartridge was developed on up until, well, this is what we used into the early 2000s with my department. So by the numbers, this was the most effective bullet choice. But those numbers can be misleading because when we look at what this bullet does, yes, it'll get about 900 feet a second out of a 4-inch barrel. It'll penetrate good because it has a heavy bullet. Because of the aerodynamics of this bullet, yes, it's going to be usually very accurate. But it may not give us the best terminal performance when it hits a target. Incidentally, this is also one of those versions of this cartridge that work reasonably well in both the short barrel and the long barrel. Now, some departments did not want to issue expanding bullets. Because back in the 60s, all the flower children were saying, hey, you didn't shoot them with a friendly bullet. Well, understand this. If I take my gun out of its holster, that's a last resort. Nothing short of deadly force is going to resolve the matter. So, this bullet here, this semi-wad cutter, was a big improvement over the lead round nose. It has sharp shoulders, which means it's going to cut a full caliber hole in the intended target, as opposed to regular wad cutters, which look like a regular 38 case that somebody seated a bullet in and whacked across the top. I don't have a specimen for those handy. This would still be a viable option if you needed to shoot at longer ranges, where your wad cutter loads generally are limited to 25 to 30 yards, although I have seen people shoot them far more accurately out to 50. This bullet, because it did not depend on velocity to achieve terminal ballistics, it had that big flat nose and that big shoulder, is a good option in a lot of cases, particularly if we're talking about using the 38 Special in the woods, in the field, as a companion or hunting sidearm. Some of our hollow point designs can do well in the 4-inch and the 2-inch barrel. Right here, this is a Smith & Wesson 38 Special plus P, which means it's loaded to higher pressure, Remington Golden Saber bullet. I found it gives good expansion and good penetration in both the 2-inch barrel guns and the 4-inch barrel guns. Some bullets are better suited with one barrel length or the other because their bullets are designed to open at a given velocity or a window of velocities. And sometimes you have to have more velocity to overcome plugging of the hollow point, which could happen in clothing, animal hide, or a barrier you're having to shoot through. Incidentally, these are Winchester white box. This is the fairly inexpensive stuff. This bullet has a lead nose on it, but it's a hollow cavity. And while I've gotten very good expansion and penetration out of the 4-inch guns, it's been sadly lacking in the 2-inch guns. The round that stays typically in my 4-inch guns And generally, I would say for social occasions, is this Federal 129 grain HydroShock. I have gotten good terminal performance out of this bullet with anything I've shot at it with it. Incidentally, even though this bullet shoots accurately out of my snubbies, it doesn't give me the expansion that I require in an expanding type bullet. A lot of people are scared of overpenetration. I'm not so much. I want as much penetration as I can get. Here's the reason. If we're talking about a personal protection round against a two-legged critter, then overpenetration might be a problem. Understand, I'm more likely to use my pistols to shoot a four-legged critter, a mad hog, a bad bear, than I am a human being. Now, in those cases, I want as much penetration as I can get while still getting good expansion. This bullet here is Remington's 158 grain lead semi-wad cutter hollow point. This was the FBI load. Incidentally, while people were bad-mouthing the 9mm with its 115 grain silver tip during the 1986 Miami shootout, this was the load that was in 5 of the 8 agents involved, because 3 had SWAT training and were allowed to carry a semi-automatic handgun. The other 5 had 38 and 357 revolvers. Out of your 3-inch and 4-inch revolvers, this bullet had a great reputation for stopping power. Incidentally, I also like using this in my 4-inch guns as a woods gun. So this is normally a good choice when we're dealing with 4-legged predators as well. The bullet has enough weight, it's going to penetrate well, and it's a soft enough lead alloy out of the 4-inch gun. It's going to give me good expansion. However, out of my 2-inch guns, while it's going to give me good penetration, I'm not going to get the expansion I want. How can we do that? The easy thing is to say we up the velocities. Again, we're limiting ourselves today with factory ammunition. This is a buffalo bore, 158 grain, lead semi-wad cutter hollow point. As far as the bullet's construction, this is made of soft lead. As opposed to the Remington load, this one has a cup on the bottom to help cut your lead down. It's called a gas check. Now, this bullet gives me good expansion, good penetration in my 4-inch guns. It also gives me good penetration and good expansion in the 2-inch guns. Here's where things go out of balance. As opposed to the 950 feet a second the Remington cartridge gives us, this one chronographs at 1150 feet a second out of the 4-inch gun, and still over 1,000 feet a second out of the 2. But you don't have necessarily the best control over them. So, what might be a good option for the 2-inch gun? Well, when I can get them, and they've been a little scarce lately, definitely the 125 plus P Golden Saber. I've also seen the 125 Gold Dots do well. I don't like super light bullets for most things unless I'm shooting varmints or critters. For pest control, 110 grain bullet and 38 or 357 Magnum velocities works well. But to give me a little more weight, a lot of times I've been favoring this 120 grain Federal bullet in my 2-inch guns. It gives me good control, good penetration. This is the punch bullet, and it works well out of those 2-inch guns. But because of the increased velocity, 100 to 150 feet a second you get out of the 4-inch guns, many times it goes in and opens up and doesn't give me adequate penetration. So whenever we're looking at a 4-inch barrel versus a 2-inch barrel in 38 Special, it's one of those cartridges like the 9mm where your terminal performance can be either very good or sadly lacking, depending on what you need. If I'm shooting coyotes at 50 to 75 yards, yes, I'm going to use some hot loaded 110 grain bullets that are loaded well above what most people consider sane. But if I want something that's going to perform all around for a personal protection round against two-legged predators, what I like to call the most extreme of social occasions, I'm going to make my choices on my ammunition based on the gun that I carry. Maybe it's one of those circumstances where I'm able to carry the 6-shot 4-inch barrel gun. Yes, you can conceal them. Shoulder harnesses inside the waistband. Wear a longer jacket depending on the time of the year. So where the 38 Special is a very useful cartridge, particularly if you don't want Magnum level recoil and don't require Magnum level performance, if we're intelligent about our ammunition selections, many times it's a good option. At one time, it was our most popular cartridge in this country. So this has been a look at it. I'm losing daylight, so I'll have to tell y'all later on.